And I wasn't paying attention. I'm sorry. Hello, everyone. This is Liz from the library. I was supposed to unmute us before we went live, and I just didn't. I'm here with Ross Meeker from the OSU Ross County Extension Office, and he's going to talk to us today. We have actually two garden programs over the next 2 months, both dealing with things that you can do in the fall to be a little bit ready for making your spring easier in the garden. And today, the topic is turf and turf alternatives. So, how about you take it from there, Ross?
All righty. Well, thank you, Liz, for having me again. I always enjoy these classes. As Liz said, my name is Ross Meeker. I am the Ag and Natural Resource Educator here in Ross County. And today we're going to be talking a little bit about some of what we should be doing in our lawn and our turf scenarios this fall to set us up well for the spring. And we're going to go through that a little quickly. There's some pretty generic things, and then the details are kind of a case-by-case scenario. And as we go through those, I definitely encourage you guys to reach out to me. I love solving those puzzles and helping people with their individual scenarios. And what we're going to hope to get to pretty quickly, and where I want to focus are some of the tips and tricks for successful reseeding and repairing lawn issues, and then really delve into some of the lawn alternatives that are becoming very popular today, in kind of some of the scenarios we can use a different approach to make our lives a little easier. And so,
Would you like your PowerPoint?
yes.
There you go.
All righty. I think. All right. There we go. Everything working? Okay. All right. So, again, up first, we're going to talk about some best management practices here in the fall, and what we need to do to set ourselves up for success in the spring. First thing I'm going to talk about is how do we mow in the fall, and what do we need to be doing this time of year. We're going to touch on what we can do for the sake of our soil, and what fertilizers we should be looking at here in the fall. And then some pest control. This is definitely the time to handle some of our peskier weeds. A lot of people don't think of controlling the dandelions and stuff this time of year. They're kind of over the yard for the year and they're ready to park the mower. But this is if we want to get ahead, this is a great time to tackle some of those things. So let's talk about mowing. This will be a little dry, but when we're mowing in the fall, we all know things are changing. You can tell when you're mowing that the grass is getting chewier. It's dusty, and what we're seeing is, as the photo period of the day is shortening, days are getting shorter, the grass is leaning towards its reproductive state, trying to get the job done before fall. And our goal is to prevent that. We don't want it to go to seed. We want to control that scenario and encourage the plant to tiller and come back again next year. And so we want to mow frequently enough to prevent that. But on the flip side, we also want to make sure that we're encouraging as much plant growth as we can so that we have a healthy root mass to survive the winter, that we can green up quickly in the spring. And so I'd love to give you guys a magic height that to set your mowers at, but it's really a case-by-case decision and what species you have present. Here are my rules of thumb. Don't let it go to seed. Make sure that we're encouraging tillering. That means each individual grass plant is working hard to set out fall tillers. Those will be our most successful tillers for the spring. And make sure that we're leaving enough height to provide a little bit of cushion from the freezing cold surface temperatures to keep the crown of the plant nice and cozy down in the next to the earth, where the soil can provide some warmth. We want to limit stress this time of year. We don't want to be mowing every week and forcing that our turf to be using all of its resources to search for water, search for food, and recovering from injuries mowing when we're dry. This isn't the time of year turf really wants to get going. And again, preparing for winter, making sure we're not mowing things too short so that we have a healthy root mass going into freezing temperatures. Real quick, through fertility, this is a topic that we could spend an entire day on. I have offered classes before on a more detailed version of this. And if you guys have questions, reach out to me, or if you're interested in having an entire class on this, I'd be happy to do it. When we're talking about lawn fertility, first thing I want everyone to do is run out and get a soil test. They are extremely inexpensive. They're really simple to have done, and they really just remove the guessing game when it comes to what does my lawn need. We have a nasty habit of saying, hey, every fall I'm going to go buy a bag of weed and feed and I'm going to throw it on my lawn. Well, that's not always needed. So not only is it a waste of money, it can sometimes cause problems, and is definitely not something we want to do in light of today's water quality issues. In the fall, if we are applying fertilizers, there are a lot of quote unquote miracle blends and 1, 2, 3 step processes out there that do work. I don't want to knock any of them, but this time of year, we're not really interested in bolstering growth and stuff, right? We're trying to amend the soil and set ourselves up better for next year. And so we want to focus on those immobile fertilizers. This is our phosphorus and our potassium. Other fertilizers that are mobile in the soil are nitrogens, our sulfurs, and even our many of our micronutrients that we use to keep things the right color are soluble in water. So if we're putting them out there in the fall with winter rains and winter snow melt, we're really just watching dollars go down the drain, and worse, we're putting a lot of those into our water system, which isn't healthy for the environment. And so hold those back, save them for the spring where we have a nice growing living component to use them instead of waste them. This is an excellent time of year to apply lime to our soil. Lime is something we use to correct the pH balance in our soil. When things get too acidic, we use lime, which is a form of calcium carbonate, to bring it back to a healthy level. We like to see this done in fall because it takes about 2 to 3 months for lime, even Pell lime that we use on yards and stuff, to mineralize and become available for the turf to uptake. Well, it doesn't uptake it, but it changes the soil. And so now's the appropriate time to do lime.
Just a quick question for you, Ross.
Yes.
You mentioned the soil testing, and I know that usually that is something that your office does. Is that something that your office is doing right now?
Yes. I think I probably walked 100 acres last week pulling soil samples. And so it is something we love to help you with. We want to make sure we're doing those things properly. We relay you to a different lab to get the actual testing done, and that is an expense we do not cover. But we love coming out with you, helping you pull a proper soil test, and that we are definitely a resource when it comes time to go over those results and see what you really need. Give us a
And so if
call.
somebody just calls your office, you
Yep.
can walk them through that?
Yep.
Perfect.
Give me a call. I'll show up with a soil probe. I'll bring you the bags and tell you where to mail it to. And then when you get the results back, I'm more than happy to go over them with you. So,
Great, thank you.
yep. And we not only do fertilizer, we can do compaction tests. I can help you walk through a percolation test and how to get those done on your property. Those are things. Those are puzzles that I love to solve.
Great.
As nerdy as that sounds. Um, Next thing is, this is a great time of year to fix the yard. You know, if we want to apply compost or top dress our soil, and when I say top dress, a common practice in the turf industry is to take either sand or biosolids, which is reclaimed waste that has been properly composted, or just garden compost, in spreading that over the yard and using it to fix weak areas or to fix undulations or bumps in your yard. This is the time of year to be doing that. We still have enough time for the turf to grow through it before we enter solid dormancy in November, and you'll really see a big change in your yard come spring because you're fixing a lot of the drainage issues. Your chiropractor will like you because the mower will be a lot smoother. And again, I'm going to go kind of quickly through pest control. The fall is the time we need to be dealing with our broadleaf weeds, specifically our biennials. So if you fight dandelions or the plantains, the either buckhorn plantain or I'm going to blank on the other one. the docks, the curly docks, things like that. There's really ugly weeds that we fight, as well as the winter annuals, the purple dead nettle and the hembent that we see in the spring. This is the time of year to control those. A really cheap shot of a broadleaf herbicide, whether that's in a pre-mixed weed and feed system or a 2,4-D application, we can use very little, not work and not have a huge concern about the environment because we're timing things properly. We're not going to hurt the bees. We're not going to hurt the flowers because those things are already entering dormancy. So this is a safe, proper time to deal with those. And if we deal with them now when they're the size of a nickel or a dime, they're a lot easier to handle than when we get into the spring. Nimblewill is a common weed, and I have a picture of it in the next one coming up. If anyone has yards that have a real fuzzy looking light tan patches early in the spring, it's an annual weed that grows this time of year and has underground structures, is really hard to control. Normally by the time people are complaining about it, it's too late. This is the time of year to deal with it. The best way to handle it is either spot spraying with a broad spectrum herbicide such as glyphosate, or there are some dedicated herbicides like tenacity that will clean this up. A lot of people want to tackle crabgrass this time of year. I prefer seeing that, hold that off till spring. There's a real narrow window where we can effectively take care of crabgrass, and it's at the other end of the season. On here, I noted cornmeal. Cornmeal has been used as a organic, in quotations, organic control for non-germinated weeds. It can be effective. It takes a lot of work and kind of a lot of luck in our weather, but that should also be done in the spring. All right, now on to the interesting bit, at least for me. This is a time of year for us to be concerned about seeding grass, whether we're reseeding or interseeding. And these are two tools in our bag for fixing our yard. Reseeding or a renovation, I'm talking about a clean slate approach where we've given up on our yard and we're going to clean slate. We're going to kill everything there and start over. We're going to go into that. And interseeding, where I have an okay yard, but I want to improve it, and I want to do what I can to encourage the right varieties and the right growth pattern in my yard so that I have a better looking yard for longer in the season. We're going to go into each of those in a little bit of detail, but the first thing we'll do is we'll talk about which is right for me. Is it time to clean slate and give up on what I have and start over, or is it still something that I can work with and work through? And then we'll talk about the goals and how we're going to do each. The choice to me comes down to time and money. Interseeding, it's great for improving a so-so stand of grass, as I said. It's much cheaper, but the end result, a perfect lawn, is farther off. It might take you 2 or 3 years to kind of slowly massage a so-so lawn into, a showstopper. But it can be done. It's really not that difficult. It just takes some planning and some consistency. And then the other option is, let's just start all over. We're going to terminate the crop that's here. We're going to take the opportunity to fix the structure of the yard. Do I have deeper issues? Do I have drainage issues? Do I want to add some tile? Am I already doing something to my house that's going to tear up my yard? And hey, this is a heck of an opportunity to start again and start with a clean slate and pick and choose the species that I want to deal with going forward. And then, time and money. Is this something that my HOA wants fixed today? Or is this something I'm okay with working and slowly improving over time? So there's a lot of personal decisions there. This is a picture of my yard. From right here, it looks pretty weedy. But I would consider this patch in my yard still fixable. If we look at some of the broadleafs in here, if I can use my cursor, if I can find it, there it is. The little guys here, the larger leaf here is a wild violet. This particular part of my yard, I don't mind it out there. It's kind of pretty in the spring. I've got a little bit of clover. He's providing nitrogen, so I don't mind him. But if I guess I see 1 or 2 strands of large crabgrass there. But if we look at the finer grasses, I still have fescue. I still have some ryegrass, the really thin, wispy stuff. And I would actually say that you can't tell because the broadleaves really make it look bad, but about 50% of that stand is desirable species. And so this is a yard I would suggest, hey, a little bit of weed control and a little bit of interseeding, and we can bring this up to showstopper quality without doing a complete gut job. And so, people look at this like, oh, you're just going to have to bring in sod or going to have to hire somebody to totally redo the yard. I don't think we're there yet. This particular patch is okay. We can bring this back to life. These next 2 options, I'm going to call do-overs. If we look here, this is a high traffic area that kind of lays wet. I just don't have enough root mass to bring any of these desirable species. As soon as I find my cursor, there are clumps, but we just have too much to deal with. And I have some undesirable grass species here. Here's a barnyard grass, this really bright white rosette with or crown with an ugly panicle. We've got dandelions everywhere, some curly docks. The clover's not even surviving, right? This is a candidate for a gut job. It's going to be a lot easier to kill everything present here and start over. And then over here in this picture, this kind of looks like grass, but if we look right in my shadow here, all of this broadleaf wispy grass, that's the nimblewill I was referring to earlier. And we have a lot of it in Ohio or in Ross County right now because we've had several wet years in a row, and it's just had a competitive advantage over our desirable species. And so if I wanted to deal with the nimblewill, I'd lose 80% of what's green here. And it's just time to start over in these 2 scenarios. So again, deciding between am I reseeding or overseeding, it's going to depend on the severity of your situation and what your time tolerance is. But these 2 are do-overs. And then obvious repairs. We had a kiddie pool all summer. And so this is not going to come back in a time frame that I'm willing to accept because the natural transition, this grass is dead. It's not coming back. The natural transition is going to say, this is going to go to weeds first. Our dandelions and our plantains are going to come back first. Then we're going to get grasses that I don't want. And then 5-6 years of mowing later, this will find the surrounding sod will finally creep in. So it will naturally heal on its own, but it's not a timeline I'm going to accept. So this is a spot that I need to reseed. And hopefully we'll get it done this week. Whether we are interseeding or reseeding, the overall goals are the same. We want good seed soil contact. We want to get to the appropriate species. We want to protect the seed so that it can last and survive long enough to get good germination. We want to provide consistent moisture. Grass seed is tiny, right? When we're seeding grass seed, we're almost not even putting it in the dirt. It's in the top 1/16 of an inch of soil, and there's a lot of variance in moisture in that top 1/16. So if you think, hey, the morning dew is enough to get grass to germinate, but if we have a morning dew now and then we skip a dew a couple mornings, it gets hot and gets dry, we have an imbibed seed that is now dried out. That seed's going to die and fail. And so we need to make sure that whether through watering, watching the weather, we're maintaining a consistent moisture in that seed layer until we get up and get going, and then provide enough water so that those young seedlings are healthy, because we're looking at September and October. We normally don't get much rain. And then on to the management. Both scenarios will be about the same. We're going to want to leave those alone until the seedlings get up to about 3 inches. And the whole idea is there, if we have fragile seedlings, if we're mowing them before then, we're going to break that seed crown or the crown of the plant. and we're going to injure it. We need it to be a little tougher to take our wheel and our foot traffic. But at 3 inches, we want to start mowing because we don't want him to hurry up and go to seed and perish before we get to winter. We want to go ahead and mow him at 3 inches and encourage tillering and encourage him to set some good overwinter tillers so that next year we're up and off to the races. And as far as timing planting for either one, right now, we need to be planting this week, maybe the next 2 weeks, and then we're going to be out of time because we got to get up. We have to have enough time to tiller and get our roots established before that killing frost and freezing temperatures get us. And some options for terminating. I get a lot of questions about this. Hey, how do I deal with things in my yard? And a lot of people want a non-chemical option. I prefer a chemical option for sod killing, just because we have a better opportunity to kill the root mass. I don't want to be a proponent of chemicals, but they do their job well. In used properly, they're perfectly safe. But here is actually an alternative option for kind of a bit I'm going to be doing next week through our office. This is a project in solarization, and this is using a tarp, a specific type of tarp to kill vegetation. This is actually for my garden for next year, and we're going to touch on it during our next class as well. But the two, the living half and the terminated half here are it's about 2 weeks under this tarp. And in that grass is completely terminated. We've generated enough heat. We've actually even sterilized the top inch or so of soil. So just an interesting way to get things terminated if we're looking for that route. In the turf industry, they'll call this covering, but the process is called solarization. Up next, I'm going to talk about choosing the right seed. There's a lot of opinion in this, especially among commercial seeders and landscape professionals, especially when the discussion comes between pure stands or mixed or blends. I like a blend. Some guys vote for a pure stand because your management is a little more black and white. But for all these, I'm going to say aim for an improved variety. Don't use the heritage blends and stuff. Use something that someone has bred or selectively bred to be a little better. Pest resistant, disease resistant, drought tolerant, and you're going to have a better looking lawn faster. In Ohio, I don't particularly like Kentucky bluegrass. You'll find it in a lot of the blends sold around here. It's okay in a blend, but if you're looking for a pure stand, I don't like bluegrass. It takes a lot of water. It really thrives in full sun, but can struggle in shade, and it's so when it comes to traffic. So if you want a quick green yard, it's fine, but come July and August, you're going to have a brown patch, unless you're irrigated. If you can irrigate in its full sun, like if we're talking like a ball diamond, a football field, something where someone's intensively managing that, I get it. Those are high traffic, but it's only once a week, right? So it's not constant traffic. So it's good for those scenarios, but for your yard, I'd stay away from it. For blends, which is what I recommend, and the reason I like a blend is because April isn't November, right? We have a very diverse year in Ohio. So I want something green and healthy the entire time. So I need a species that's going to get up and get going in the spring. I need something that's going to carry me through the drought in the summer, and I need something that's going to keep me green and pretty through Halloween in November. Then hopefully go to bed looking pretty for December and January. I like blends that include a ryegrass. I do like a Kentucky bluegrass in my blends because it gets up and gets going and gives you that really pretty spring in a fescue to fill in the holes. Things I would avoid, and I see a lot of these in our contractor mixes around here, are zoysia and Italian ryegrass. Zoysia, we're just too far north. We're pushing that one, except for in a properly managed scenario. Italian ryegrass is something you'll find in contractor mixes in every store. It's quick and it's green, but the issue is it's an annual. So it's up and it's here. If you need something to be green next week for a party, this is what you want, but it's not going to be there next year. And so it's going to look really good right now, and then it's gone. And Liz, I forgot to tell you, I'd like to swap screens. Is that something I can do pretty easily?
You mean change what you're sharing?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, you can go ahead and just unshare. Actually, I think I can remove that one, and then you can share something else.
Okay. Alrighty. All right. Can everyone see our seed label here?
There we go.
Okay. I, I always want to touch on this, no matter what crop I'm talking about. Reading a seed label is really important. Seed is fairly well regulated in the United States, but every once in a while we get some products that come into our world that eked through the cracks. So I want to make sure everyone understands how to read a seed label. Make sure you're not getting something in your yard that you don't want. Um, all seed labels or things marketed as seed are supposed to have a label in the U.S. That's a USDA thing. If it doesn't have an official looking seed label, please don't plant it. We've had some fun stuff come from overseas in the past few weeks. But always look at your analysis. This is where we want to be looking for those good blends. Most of the time, you'll see a sun or shade blend or a sun and shade blend, and just make sure we're matching those to the scenario. Here is a label from one of my colleagues. Things to watch for. Make sure your other ingredients aren't getting out of hand. I guess I'm pointing with my finger. That's not doing any of you any good, is it?
Yeah, if you use the cursor, we can see
Yeah.
what you're pointing at.
So right here, make sure these stay in check. If this is getting over, the inert matter doesn't matter so much, except for dollar value. I have had some nasty seed that like 5 or 6% inert matter, and I felt like I was buying pounds of dirt. But weed seed and other crops, they're both problems for you, right? If it's another crop, it means it's what got through the seed cleaner that you don't want in your blend, and that's how we can get some even other turfs that can present as a weed in your yard. And so make sure this other crop is staying below 1%, or else you could get a very fine sprinkle of a grass that isn't going to match the rest of your yard, and it's going to stick out like a sore thumb. A lot of annual bluegrasses have come through like that, and that just immediately makes a yard look clumpy and disorderly. Up top, make sure this is matching a blend like we discussed. Um, it should make up a lot of yours, and then pay really close attention to the germination rates. Grass is kind of a finicky seed to raise. And so if you know that the nation has had a drought year or a poor crop year, just in general, you'll see these drop off for a year, and you really need to adjust your seeding rates if these go off kilter. It's not uncommon to see grass seed even only being 75% viable. It's just because it's a very difficult seed to raise. So make sure if you're planning your seeding rates that we're adjusting for a germination rate as we go forward. Um, this is a pretty decent mix. My opinion here, I would want to see some fescue in Ohio, just to kind of add some dimension to how things look. The right fescue, not the wrong one. There was a lot of tall fescue that was sold as turf years ago, and it's meant for cows, and it looks like it in your yard. Um, but aim for the fine fescues or improved fescues for your yards, and I'm going to swap back to my PowerPoint. Oh, that didn't do it.
And just to give you a heads up, Ross, we are at about half an hour here.
Okay. All right. We should be ready to delve into alternatives and move on.
Sounds great.
There we go.
There you go.
All right. Thinking outside the mower, right? And I always challenge people when I do home visits or answer calls, like, hey, I've got this problem in my yard, or I have just this spot I can't grow anything. My next question is not should we be growing there, but is it worth growing it there? And then kind of a follow up to that is like, where's the best height to mow my yard? And my thing is, what are you using your yard for? I don't understand why, and I've been guilty of it. I am guilty of it. You'll see in one of my pictures. I've got a 3 acre field that I'm mowing like my yard, and no one's walked in it this year. Why am I going to that effort? If my goal is a look, I can attain that other ways. Um, I have a play yard my kids are in. I understand. We want that nice and short and clean and soft, but sometimes I question some of our motives when we're managing these massive yards, and there are plenty of them in Ross County. And the next thing is, when is grass the wrong choice? When are we not picking our battles wisely? We're going to touch on some alternatives that can fill some of those spaces. I love some of the ground covers and things that are being done with those recently. I want to touch on xeriscapes. It's kind of an old hat thing. That was kind of probably an early 2000s trend, but I think it still has its place even here in Ohio. And then some wildlife habitat options that can really relieve the amount of work we do on our properties. This is a picture of my backyard. You can see my solarization plot there for my garden series next go around. That was where that tarp was. We showed the determination earlier, but here's about an acre patch that I mow. And my question to myself is always, when I'm out there doing it, why in the world am I doing this, right? Other than keeping Mother Nature at bay, my kids don't play in this portion of the yard. I don't have a dog run. It just seems kind of trivial to me that I'm mowing this weekly and not getting anything out of it. And so that's why I had that bullet, is this a fairway, the rough, or a green? In understanding that maybe different parts of a yard justify different management approaches. When is turf the wrong choice? Is it worth the struggle or inconsistency? If you've got a patch in your yard, we've got that one piece that's 10 foot around that makes my whole yard look bad. And I've been fighting it for years. What are our options, right? Other than, the renovation and fixing it option, here are things. One of these on my property, one's not, but they're really kind of common to questions I get. It's like, hey, I just can't get grass to grow here. What can I do? How can I get stuff to grow here? And a lot of my suggestion is maybe that's not what we need to do here. The one on the left-hand side here is underneath of a Colorado blue spruce. If you see a Colorado blue spruce in Ross County, it's a dead man walking. They will die. They're not meant to be around here. There were hundreds of them planted in the 80s and 90s, and they're just about played out. One of the major issues with them is their leaf litter kind of induces a lot of tar and tannins and acidity to the soil, and this is going to be a rough area for a long time. We're also under a tree. There's a lot of shade, and so putting grass here is probably a decision that's a losing battle, right? I could kill myself to get grass established in a place like this, or maybe it's time to pick an alternative, and we'll get into some of those in a minute. The second one here is along a house next to a driveway. Um, it's almost always damp. There are gutters. It it it's just kind of the damp side of the house. It's shaded most of the day. There's a lot of tree cover across the driveway, and I think you can even see there's been some vermiculite and stuff here where somebody's tried to amend the soil or maybe have a flower bed at one point in time, and it's just too difficult of a place to raise a typical turf or even really have a successful flower bed. And so let's look at some alternatives and what would be a better choice there. I think this one here next to the driveway, maybe the smarter thing to do is next time we re-gravel that driveway, to go ahead and put down some landscape cloth and bring the driveway over to the house. Maybe it's not worth a unit of effort. There are some things we can do there, and we might try some stuff down the road. Ground covers. I love ground covers. They're a low maintenance option that a lot of times can solve problems where turf just struggles. And then I'm going to touch on some wildlife habitats. And for people with large expanses of yard, it's a great way to cut, that 4 or 5 hours a week mowing your yard down to 45 minutes. So we can go back to living our lives instead of riding on a mower. This is one of my favorite ground covers, especially for around here. And definitely if you lived in a shaded, kind of inconsistent area. This is, I'm going to pronounce it wrong. There's an extra I in it. Coruscant mint. This is a very low growing spearmint. It likes traffic. You can walk on it. And from 10 foot back, it's hard to tell that this isn't just turf. It provides really lush green. It smells good, right? It's spearmint. It smells good. Um, it's borderline invasive. So once you get this thing started, it's going to take off and it's going to choke out weeds. You're not going to have to work really hard to maintain this. And one of the great benefits is in the picture before you is really kind of as tall as it gets. And so as far as a low maintenance option, you might have to mow a little to kind of keep it looking orderly, but it's not a weekly job. And so it's a great option for some of those difficult areas, especially like in this yard, we see a lot of obstacles. This is my favorite for a turf alternative, out in the yard. I love micro clovers. They are a kind of a selected variety of white clover. I think most typically a kind of a Dutch variety that's been selected for really small leaves. So it's really fine. So it's kind of hard to tell that it's all clover from the road. But this stuff only has the potential to grow 5-6 inches tall to begin with. And so even completely mature, it's not really that tall. It's going to be green clear through December. It's going to never need any nitrogen. It requires very little fertility. And it's as long as you keep the white flowers knocked off the top, really hardly any mowing throughout the year. So I just think this is a great eco alternative. It doesn't take much water. If you are in a spot where you're irrigating constantly, this is a great option to just relieve your water bill. If you have, like this would be under that blue spruce, if you have a shady, kind of rough growing, rough terrain, lots of root balls up and over, instead of fighting and struggling and damaging the trees, maybe it's time to look at a ground cover. This is an excellent option. Pachysandra. It's kind of slow to grow, so you're going to need to put a lot of plants out to get this kind of coverage anytime soon, but it likes shade. And if you have an area where you just can't get anything to grow because you have mature trees, and mature trees are an excellent value to a property. And there's just not enough sun to support turf. This is a wonderful option. It looks good. You can mow right up next to it and keep a clean edge. It's going to choke out a lot of the competition. You're not going to fight weeds. It's just a wonderful option. Kind of a warning here, it can become weedy. So, make sure you have a nice margin between it and like a native area. That way you can keep it in check. Wildlife habitat. If you've got a wide open field and you're just tired of mowing it, this is a wonderful option. Wildlife habitats. There's even some grants out there and some NRCS funding to help you get these established in your yards. They're helping our pollinators, they're helping our wildlife. But as far as we're looking here, if you've got a 10-acre yard, you could mow once or twice around the outside and seed this to the rest of it, and you're only going to have to mow it once a year. I know with the past few really mild winters, we've been mowing almost from March to November. It's a lot of passes, and if you have a large yard, that can really add up in time and money. And this is a wonderful, attractive alternative that's low maintenance and giving back to the environment. So there are options out there for people looking to change how they approach issues in their yard. Some ground covers I don't like. I do like them. They have their place. English ivy, I grew up with this. We had it on a retaining wall behind the house I grew up in. It was great, right? You never had to worry about weeds. It choked everything out. It held the bank fairly well because it puts out adventitious roots, but it likes to climb trees. And if you don't stay after it, it will tear your trees down. So it takes a lot of work to really kind of contain and keep there. Creeping thyme can also become invasive and kind of hard to wrangle and keep control where you want it. But it's a nice fragrant addition. They call it a steppable. If you've got cobblestones or stepping stones and you're walking through your garden, if you step on this, you're going to release that fragrance. And it's kind of a neat thing to add to a property. Xeriscaping, this is this became popular, and I always like to remind people that this is an option. It's not green, it doesn't make you feel good, but it can be a very attractive solution to a difficult to maintain area. And while, we're not producing oxygen and we're not providing green spaces, I would wager to say that if you live in town and this is the extent of your yard, a place this size, 100 square feet or so, you're probably doing more for the environment not mowing than you would ever add. It's easy. You do it once and you're done. Some of the issues with these, especially in Ohio, we can fight algal growths in these just because we're damp. This was a practice that became popular in the desert where irrigation was expensive. But we can fight fungus and mold, making this kind of unattractive. And then weeds and leaf debris that would blow into this are just, they're not completely maintenance free, I guess is what I'm trying to say. They bring a different type of maintenance to the table. But as far as the daily and weekly work, it's just not there. So I do like xeriscaping. I think it probably has a place somewhere on everyone's property. And I think that's the end of my slideshow. And I forgot to put a slide here that says questions. But if Liz, do we have?
We don't have any questions right now.
Okay.
I think you covered it.
Okay, I hope so. Ground covers are a neat thing. I hope to play with them going forward. I'm hoping a lot of my yard is going to be micro clover because I don't like mowing, which isn't something the guy in charge of horticulture crops in the county should say. But I don't like mowing. I think there are smarter approaches to it. So.
Great. Now, remind us of what we're talking about in October.
Yes, in October, we're going to talk about some putting your garden to bed and how to best set yourself up for success in 2020. We're going to touch on getting a new garden site established. I did it incorrectly this year, so we're going to do it properly. And you guys saw a couple pictures of that in our video today of my solarization in the backyard. We're going to touch on cover crops and how they can make your life easier in the spring. We're also going to talk about what we should be doing with bulbs and flower beds as we move into the fall. And I know our last video we planted some pumpkins. I don't think they're going to make it by that day.
I think we're looking at.
I didn't irrigate as much as I should.
Well, and this class, it's going to be October 15th. We're not doing the Monday as we have done in the past because that Monday is a day that I wasn't sure we would be available. So it's going to be Thursday, October 15th, same time though, 4 o'clock. And yeah, so we talk, but that will be a little early for the pumpkins because I remember when you planted them, you were counting back the weeks
And it
to
was
have
real
them.
tight, real tight.
It was a really tight, exactly. It was a tight squeeze to get them in and ready for Halloween. So I think you're right that they won't be ready by the 15th.
Yeah. No,
But you'll be able to show what they look like if you have some pictures of.
we've got some Greek ones out there, but
Mhm.
yeah. No, in
Great.
next go around, I hope weather permitting, we'll be back out in the garden, and I hope to have my counterpart filming for me so we can do a little more hands-on and a little less of this PowerPoint life.
Great.
So,
Well, thanks again, Ross, and I'll see you next month.
all right, thank you.
Bye.
Bye.